to our last session of Impact 2019. On to Pitbull after this, everyone. So I'm incredibly excited to be joined by two amazing architects here shortly on stage. Jamie Heary, our distinguished architect, and Jamie Sambauer, our principal architect. Listen, our main objective of this session is to take a complex topic, zero trust, turn it into something easy to talk about, to demonstrate, and to position with your customers. Now, we've got a great agenda to do that, but before we get started, I do have a disclaimer. This is an engineering session, so it will be fast, furious, and deep technical content. But our agenda is great. We're going to talk about the why zero trust now. We're going to move into a bit of a history lesson. And then we're going to ground ourselves in the why Cisco. Why Cisco? How do we differentiate around three major pillars of our customer's business? The workforce, the workload, and the workplace. And then we're going to end on a call to action. So let's get started. First of all, I don't have to tell any of you, every day you're talking to your customers, you know that the landscape is shifting for IT. Organizations, they're adding new types of users. They're adding vendors, third-party vendors, contractors, remote workers. Devices are exploding on their network. It's still estimated that there'll be 50 billion devices by 2020. Applications, servers, workloads, containers are communicating across hybrid cloud. And of course, an explosion of IoT devices. Bottom line is the perimeter is changing. The perimeter is disappearing. And with that comes these major business challenges for our customers. Our customers right now are feeling they have a larger attack surface. They have gaps in visibility, and they're asking themselves these questions. Who can I trust? Are my devices healthy? Do they have good hygiene? Are their software up to date? They're asking about what devices are on their network. Who are their devices connected to and talking to? As Chuck said on stage the other day, what about the content? What about the data? Where is it going? Is it sensitive? Our customers need us more than ever, because with this becomes major security challenges. The attackers are getting more sophisticated every day, and the breaches are on the rise. Every day we hear about 10,000s of devices are being breached in less than 10 minutes. Our very own Talos has said that malware is increasing by 300% on IoT devices. Verizon data research investigation reports that 70% of all employees reuse passwords. They go on to say that 81% of all hacking-related breaches are based on stolen or weak passwords. Our customers need us. What do they need from us? They need help, and they're all asking for help around a zero-trust architecture. I want to welcome Jamie and Jamie on stage to take us through how Cisco can help differentiate their business.
Yeah.
You guys are awesome.
Take that from me. Thank you, thank you. All right. Thank you. All right, well, let's get into it. So I'm Jamie Heary. This is Jamie Sambauer. He's going to be our demo czar for today. And we're going to walk you through the Cisco Zero Trust architecture and really show you how we differentiate in this area. And we're going to solve a lot of those problems that Shelley just showed us our customers are dealing with. Well, let's start with what happens today in most of our customers when we trust too much. I mean, think about your customers' networks. Think about their wired network for a second. If you plugged in one of those wired jacks, what would happen? What would you have access to? I bet you'd have access to damn near everything. So, bad guys know that too. So what do? They want to get through that perimeter because all the customers spend all their money on that perimeter. So best way to do that, email. Email's the #1 attack vector. So as a bad actor, I'm going to do recon, and I'm going to go out to LinkedIn of the world, and I'm going to create a nice spearfish for my victim. So John, the victim, he clicks on that email. He's inside that perimeter. When he clicks on the email, of course, malware happens. I'm now exploited, and the perimeter is bypassed. I'm inside where it's all open. So what am I going to do? That malware is going to try to spread. We call that lateral movement. What is it trying to do? It's trying to find the good stuff. Most of that good stuff's in the data center. So it's going to pivot into the data center. But along the way, it's password harvesting. It's trying to find the administrator passwords, the root passwords, like the really good stuff, so it can open up more and more. And then eventually, I'm going to find some things. I'm going to do a data exfiltration to get it out, but I'm going to use a trusted credential to do so it doesn't look like I'm doing something bad. And then the bad guy, he's got to show me the money moment. So with this, we have this really cool tool called Monkey. And it's one of those tools that you could show it to your customer, you could run it in your own labs to show them what happens when you have no zero trust involved. So Jamie, why don't you take us through this?
So this is Infection Monkey, and the first thing I'm going to do is actually give it a list of credentials. And so it's typically going to be compromised credentials, and then I can give it a list of networks to scan, something like post-breach detection files or scripts, and then tell it how I want it to communicate on this network. Now, once I do that, I can select some exploits that I want it to run against my servers. Now, it's going to start on one host. So we've got this Monkey Island server, and its role in life is to start spreading. And so Monkey's going to find, exploit, and install its software on anything it can find. And so you see how it goes from one host to another host. If we take a look at this host, it's actually trying a bunch of different exploits and lands on using those compromised credentials to be able to exploit. Now, once it's on another host, it's going to continue to wreak havoc and try to get on as many hosts as it can. And this really articulates or shows you lateral movement, right? Start on one, jump to the other, start scanning out. Now, as this thing runs, it finds more and more hosts. It's going to try to compromise them. Some it's going to be able to, and some it's not. By the time it finishes running, it's going to find everything it can in those networks using the tools it has, and it's going to produce a nice little report. And this report's going to show us some basic recommendations like, hey, you shouldn't have these weaker stolen passwords. Maybe multi-factor might help. But it's also going to give you a peek into how many machines it found, which in this case is 57, and how many it was able to breach. Now, 11% doesn't sound like a lot, but you can see how we're able to bypass all those perimeter defenses just by having that one host on the inside.
That's awesome, Jamie. So can you imagine if you ran such a tool, or your customer did, inside of their environment, where we know in the data centers there's not much segmentation, there's really no zero trust going on. This would really show them, oh my goodness, I really have a problem. Does it in a nice, neat way. And in a safe environment, too, which I kind of like. We can't talk about zero trust without giving a quick history lesson. So this isn't new. The concepts of zero trust have been with us since 2004. Started with the Jericho Forum. And that's where we started to look at what happens when that perimeter dissolves. Because even back then, we saw it. Deperimeterization is the word that they used. And Cisco did host that initial meeting. So we've been dealing with this for quite a while. Fast forward to 2010, and that's the first time zero trust, the term, was coined. It was coined by Forrester. So along comes Google, and they say, I'm going to do zero trust for real. And they set up the first production deployment of it. It was all cloud-focused, and they called it BeyondCorp. Then in 2017, Zero Trust Extended happens. And that's where Gartner or Forrester looked at their model and said, hey, we need to upgrade this, make it more modern. So they added 3 additional pillars to the 3 that they started with. Now, today, we generally use the term Zero Trust Architecture. It's important to note that along this journey, the customer interest on Zero Trust is absolutely skyrocketed. It's really a top-of-mind issue for all of our customers. And they're asking us, hey, Cisco, how do you do Zero Trust? We need to start with the basic tenet for Zero Trust. If you don't remember anything about what Zero Trust is, remember this one: ubiquitous least privilege access. So ubiquitous, it means everywhere. I need it in the cloud. I need it on-prem. I need it while you're remote, while you're on-prem. And then least privilege, we've been doing that forever. I mean, think about things like .1x and NAC. We've been doing that for over a decade. It just means grant access, but make it very, very specific. Zero Trust does force us to change our mindset just a little bit. And we have to assume that everything is out to get us. Everything's malicious until proven otherwise. So take a look at what we mean here. All those devices that you have, they're all compromised. Every user, they're malicious, and they have malicious intent. They're out to get you. And data, everything that that person's sending, it's full of viruses and it's totally malware. The network that you're on, it's spying on you. So with those things in mind, we bring in our zero trust engines. And we do automated visibility and trust verification. And this is what we're going to show you through the Cisco Zero Trust architecture, how we do this. At the other end, spits out all the good stuff. How trustworthy are these things? Oh, well, that thing that I thought was compromised, it's actually a compliant BYOD iPad. So don't worry about it. It's Bob, and he's from the IT group. And on the list of all the context that we have to create a restricted access policy for access control. What you'll never see in Zero Trust is a permit any there. You might see a deny any, but you'll never see a permit any in a true Zero Trust world because it's all about least privilege access. So with that, let's dive right into the Cisco Zero Trust architecture. How are we differentiating? Well, first thing, we have to tell our customers this is a journey. Zero Trust, it's not a product. You can't go buy Zero Trust. Even though a lot of our competitors, that's exactly what they say. Hey, buy my widget, and you're Zero Trust compliant, if you will. So along that journey, it's important for us to show them how we can simplify that whole journey and break it up into manageable pieces. So we start with the workforce. The workforce is all about how do I understand who my users are, how can I trust those users, and the devices the users are on. Usernames and passwords aren't good enough. Single-factor authentication, it's the worst thing that we have out there. It's the highest breach that we have. Next, we move into workload. Where are those users going? Well, they're going to applications. Applications are in the workload. So how do we minimize the attack surface of those workloads? How do we really lock them down so we have least privilege access for all the users coming to those and all the workforce, all the workload and where they're going? We need to lock that down, create a nice perimeter around the workload. And then finally, the workplace. What can we do with the networks that we control? So the networks that we control, like your wired, your wireless, your VPN networks, we need to be able to establish a trust-based policy there. We're going to find a lot of IoT devices in this area. We got to deal with those because they can't, by and large, protect themselves. We're going to put a nice perimeter bubble around them so that they are protected from outside, and then if they do get compromised, we're protected from them. So how does this actually work, though? So we've broken it down into these critical areas, but how are we going to do Zero Trust? Well, the first thing is you have to establish trust. Because you're starting with that mindset of everything's bad, everything's malicious. Got to establish trustworthiness. We do that by multi-factor user identity. No more usernames and passwords only. We do device context. We figure out the identity of that device, like, do I own it? Is it enrolled in my MDM? Might be an example of that. Device posture, the health of the device. I also want to look at its location. All the relevant context I can gather, I do, and then I make and enforce a trust-based access control policy. But that trust-based access control policy, it's got to be everywhere. It has to be ubiquitous. All networks, in the cloud, on-prem, all my applications, all my users and devices, we have to all do Zero Trust. But that's not good enough. And that's where, unfortunately, a lot of our competitors, that's where they stop. They don't go to the next piece, which is continuous trust verification. It's not a one-time thing, Zero Trust. It's not just at the point of access. I always have to make sure that you're still as trustworthy as you were the first time I looked at you. And we do that through a bunch of things. Are the original tenants still true? Okay, they are. Cool. I'll let you in. Or is that traffic? Is it malicious traffic? Well, if it is, I'm going to change your trust level. And what if AMP says you're compromised? Well, if AMP says you're compromised, then your trust is now 0. I'm going to bring it back, and I'm going to reevaluate your trustworthiness all over again. Within Zero Trust, we have a lot of ways we could do this. We have a big portfolio, and the breadth and depth of our portfolio is a huge differentiator for us. But to simplify the journey, we need to bring out some primary solutions. Now, these are the things that are the most effective in each area. So, like Duo. I mean, what better in the workforce than Duo to do that multi-factor authentication, to figure out if the device is trustworthy or not, and then tetration. I mean, tetration excels at microsegmentation for the workload. It figures out the policy through its awesome discovery capabilities, and then it turns that discovery into a nice policy that we can use. And then finally, for the networks that we control, that's the workplace, SD Access. XC access with ICE and DNA Center really allows us to establish that least privilege access on the networks under our control. So how does Cisco compare here? I want to bring up Palo Alto for a second. If you take a look at these three critical areas, Palo Alto only plays in one of them. I mean, that's kind of crazy. They don't do anything for the workforce, for multi-factor authentication, device trust. What about the workload? Yeah, okay, they made some recent acquisitions, so I'll give them that one. But the workplace, they don't do anything at the access control point of wired, wireless. So we're in a pretty differentiated position here. When you put these three primary ones together, I'm not even extending it to the breadth of our portfolio. We have huge differentiators. Time to value. We can deploy things like Duo, so simple and easy. Tens of thousands of students under a Duo for multi-factor in less than a week. Fully deployed, and the users are happy about it. Leaders in networking and the leaders in access. We've been doing this for a decade plus. We've been doing things like .WinX. We've been doing all the wireless authentication. We're better at this than anybody else. And then unrivaled integrated architecture. I mean, we're going to show you some integrated Cisco on Cisco things today that I think will blow your mind. And then you look at the portfolio and the partners that we deal with. Look at that list. It's all the major players. And in some cases, we have one-click integration with these guys. One click, super easy, and we're off and running. The portfolio depth we have to be able to enhance and extend that trust is massive. We can do zero trust everywhere you could possibly want it today. And the detection and the response part of this is also really cool with Cisco Threat Response and with StealthWatch. And we're going to show you that as well. So that brings us to our first demo. And we wanted to start by just showing you what's possible. Here's an end-to-end Cisco architecture working together with the integrations, and it's just a sliver of what we can do. But it deals with three major customer problems. Hey, first one is, I need to discover and classify all my devices. And I need to do it everywhere. And then I need a zero trust access policy, and I need that ubiquitously. I need that everywhere too. And then I need constant verification that the trustworthiness of my users and my devices, it's still at the level I need it to be. So with that, Jamie, why don't you show us how this is done?
So we're going to start with the DNA Center. And as Jamie said, one of our big benefits here is we own this network. So we can look at the campus fabric and do some very important parts, which is, number one, deploy .1x. So if we're able to deploy .1x and things like TrustSec and scalable group tags, ICE can do its job better and be able to authenticate every user and device, and also bring in additional trust information like hardware inventory. What are the serial numbers? We can also see a full realm of the different applications that each of the workstations are running and use that data to create compliance check. You're not allowed unless you have an up-to-date antivirus, for example. Now, for all those IoT devices, we can do endpoint profiling where we can see all the mobile devices, infrastructure devices, could be medical or financial devices. So profiling is going to give us a bunch of that data. Now, one of the things that's coming out pretty shortly here is what we call device classification service. It's a service in DNA Center that will help us do machine learning for endpoint groupings. So if I have 120 endpoints and they have 5 common attributes, this tool can make recommendations to help us profile in different ways. Now, it looks very pretty. It helps you actually see it in a hierarchical manner, as well as be able to create simple and intuitive rules and export those to ICE if you want to. Now, once we have all this data in the workplace, we can do rules for phones, access points, printers, and different role-based access control for users. Now, that leads us into group-based policy, so micro-segmentation for the workplace and being able to create rules like employees talking to IoT. Now, once we move out of the workplace into workloads, we can start to bring in things like the next-gen firewall to do group-based policy, where I'm going to allow, for example, employees talking to my financial workloads. Now, this, I can actually layer on threat protection. So I can do things like next-generation IPS, and also continuously verify trust with things like rapid threat containment, where we can integrate ICE and tetration directly with that next-gen IPS to respond to threats. Now, speaking of tetration, this makes it super easy to do that micro-segmentation for all of my workloads. It's going to understand the traffic and make a recommendation on the policy that should be applied, and it also gives you a ton of cool views to be able to really look and evaluate the policy that it's making the recommendation on. So only port 80 to my front-end application, or 3306 to my database application. So you've probably seen that pie chart. Everyone's favorite is obviously this app view, where I can really see the criticality of this application and what ports and protocols need to be there. Now, one way Tetration's making this easier is integrating directly with ICE through PXGrid with Tetration 3.3. And this allows us to bring all that context on group tagging into Tetration. Now, along with that integration, we've got other things like AWS and Meraki that can help us too. Once I've had Tetration create a policy, it's literally one-click enforcement. So every workload that has Tetration on-premise and cloud is going to be able to enforce that policy. And finally, once I've got things running, I also can do continuous trust verification with Tetration. So I'm able to see on this member server, for example, that I have ports, 9 unused ports that are open. I need to lock that down, specifically risky ports like 138 or NetBIOS ports. Now, along with attack surface and some of the forensics, Tetration also is helping us understand trust levels by the vulnerabilities of my different workloads. So I can see how many exploits are low complexity, aka easy to attack. Now, finally, let's jump into the workforce and Duo. And the first thing I'm going to do, very simplistically, is integrate with directories and get users enrolled. The next thing I'm going to do is add an application. And as you can see, there's a ton of different out-of-the-box supported applications, as well as software-defined kits that you can actually integrate into custom applications. Once I've actually enabled or hit Protect This App, I literally go through kind of an easy-to-use workflow to be able to configure policy. So you can see as clear as day, I can set up trusted endpoints, do restrictions based on OSs or different types of networks. Now, once I'm finished with the policy, I literally click Save, and it's going to start to protect that application with Duo. Now, to continue on our threat trend, Duo is also adding this brand new integration with AMP for endpoints so that not only can we check all the compliance status of the device prior to coming, but if AMP sees a threat and that host is compromised, we will no longer allow that device to authenticate to the application. So really cool brand new integration coming.
Very cool, Jamie. What do you guys think? That pretty cool? All of it come together like that? Neato. Let's recap it. A lot going on there. So we started in the workplace with SD Access, and you showed how DNA Center can set this thing up really quickly. We get .WinX deployed, and all that happens with automation. And then ICE was out there streamlining that deployment by finding everything. It was categorizing everything. I love that new machine learning for profiling. That's huge. Being able to take all those IoT devices and auto-categorize them for the group-based policies, SGTs. And then you did workload. So that pivoted from the workplace right into the workload. They're going to the applications. That's where Tetration was. It categorized everything. It auto-clustered stuff. It created those policies from what it saw. It said, yeah, this is the policy that should be, whitelisting everything. And then finally you said, well, I got to protect the apps, the users. So Duo comes in, simple, powerful setup. I mean, recurring theme with those guys. They're really easy to set up. And then the built-in integrations with AMP and just a ton of applications one click away. Really cool stuff. I mean, customer problem solved there. Let's dive into this, though. Let's really pull it all apart. And the first one we're going to go after is workforce. So workforce, it's all about establishing trust with Duo. First thing we got to do, we got to verify the identity of those users. It's not good enough to do just username and password, though, so we got to do multi-factor authentication. Maybe we'll throw in a little bit biometric in there. And then the next thing we got to do is figure out the device health of the device that they're using. And that's ensure the trustworthiness of those devices. And we do that through Duo's endpoint posture and its context visibility. It can actually tell us if the browser is out of date. It can tell us if we're using a bad Flash plugin. Just a whole bunch of things there. We take that data in that context and we enforce a risk-based and adaptive access control policy for those users and their devices. We can do this per application. So you might have a really critical application that requires biometric auth. But for your cafe menu, I don't really care, so you can just do the normal multi-factor. One of the secret sauces behind Duo is the Duo Access Gateway. We call it DAG for short. And it solves a critical problem for our customers. Our customers are moving to the cloud. They're moving to cloud apps. How do we make sure that we can secure those cloud apps in a repeatable way? So you go to your customer and you say, hey, Mr. Customer, how are you securing users as they access your cloud services? And you'll probably get one of two answers. You're going to get, oh, well, we use username and passwords, just like we do with our internal apps. Well, we know that's not good enough. Next answer you might get is, well, we do MFA. Oh, okay, how do you do it? Oh, well, we use the MFA that's built into Box, and we use the one that's built into AWS, and the one that's built into Office 365. Well, how's the user experience there? I mean, it's terrible. So with the DAG, you can put that in. You'll redirect those authentication requests from the native cloud services right to Duo. We're going to do all the things we do. We're going to do multi-factor authentication, biometric if you need it. We're going to look at the device health. So for the first time, you can tell whether a compromised device is heading to your Box account, maybe even your critical files. So with this one, we're going to show you an employee that's off-prem and they're going to a SaaS service. 3 customer problems we're going to solve here. One is protect against those stolen creds. Number one issue that we have. Then provide simple but strong access control to those applications, no matter where the user is or where those apps are, I don't care. And then protect those users while they're remote from threats. So Jamie, why don't you show us how this one works?
So I'm going to start as myself at Starbucks, like many of us start their day remotely. And the first thing I'm going to do is log into the Duo Access Gateway. And as I log in, I'm going to go through normal multi-factor authentication, where I get a push to my phone, and I'm able to approve that multi-factor authentication. Now, for this application, we're actually requiring biometrics, so it took a Face ID before it's going to allow me to get into the Duo Access Gateway. Now, really cool portal that I can list out all the cloud applications, like my Corporate Secrets app, that I want to now go and check what's going on. Now, you can see it's actually prompting me, because I don't have a firewall turned on, it's making me self-remediate and get my firewall up to date or turned on prior to actually accessing this Corporate Secrets application. Now, once I have access to that, I can do my job, post some things, etc. Next thing I'm going to do in my day is actually access Office 365. And so SSO between that DAG and Office 365. And I've got an email here to update the Cisco Zero Trust TDM. I'm actually going to go try to share that on Box. And Cisco Umbrella steps in to be able to block that communication with Box. Now, I also have an email from my buddy Randy Rivera to update my expenses. And needless to say, he actually phished me and tried to send me to a malicious site as well. This Umbrella steps in and is able to block that. Now, later that day, if I go home and try to access that same DAG from a personal device, I can no longer get there because the corporate policy says no personal devices. Now, it seemed like a lot of crazy technology going on, but this demo, we can see how easy it is for the administrator to set up this policy. So we see for the first application that we're only allowing those corporate endpoints. This is called trusted endpoints within the Duo policy, as well as we can do a ton of checks for OSs, browsers, plugins, etc. So I can control exactly what types of devices connect. Now, finally, we also have a ton of other things like blocking Tor and VPN networks, and that requiring biometric per application can be turned on or turned off. Now, for my super secret application, I can have a differentiated policy within Duo. And this one, I wanted to show the brand new Endpoint Health app that's checking whether that firewall is turned on or off. Duo also makes the logging and reporting really easy. So I can actually come into the application and view the authentication log and see where I was off the network and on the network with the firewall. So all of those. Now jump into Umbrella. Umbrella has this brand new app discovery dashboard, which I wanted everyone to see. I can see all the different SaaS applications across my entire org and start to classify them as approved or denied depending on what the organization's policy is. It's going to help me report and understand what's going on in my organization. But the key thing here is I can actually pivot from this dashboard right into my policy. So I can easily block applications that I don't want users to use. And Umbrella even makes it easier if I want to go deeper. So I can actually block just uploads, but still allow read-only access to Box or some other SaaS application. So really, this powerful use case for all the remote users that come into the organization.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff there, totally differentiating. Let's recap it real quick, though. So we started with Duo. We had that remote employee. We put the DAG in that app portal. I love that app portal because you go to the portal and every app that contractor needed was there. So he knows where he can go. It's a really nice place for SSO too. So as I pivot between those apps, I'm not signing in all the time. And we did biometric, we did device health, and we also did device trust. And then you showed off that new endpoint health and how easy it is to detect some new things that we couldn't do before, like is the firewall on, is the device encrypted, but then you showed the self-remediation, which was nice. It was really easy for them to get well. And then the umbrella remote protection, where you block the fish, you blocked an unapproved app, and we really showed how Umbrella is excellent at doing shadow IT. We now have that new app portal, which was really cool as well. And then along the way, both of these things are so easy to set up. I mean, we can get these things set up in literally hours. Awesome, really cool stuff. Let's move into the next part of Duo, which is the Duo Network Gateway. And again, we're going to solve a really fundamental problem our customers have been dealing with for literally years. And that is, how do I take an internal app and allow my external users access to it? How do we usually do that? We've always been using remote access VPN, which in some cases is awesome. That's a really good way to do it, but it's a heavy-handed approach when I only want a contractor to access one or two of those applications. Like maybe they're just they're doing my HVAC system, and that's a couple servers, that's all I want them to be able to access. So enter the Duo Network Gateway. It's a reverse proxy. So I publish my URLs. They go to those URLs on the outside on the internet. They hit the Duo Network Gateway, and then it happens, Duo does all the cool stuff it does, like multi-factor, biometric, device health, posture assessment. All that's going to happen before I let them into the internal app. And we can support web apps, and we can do SSH. So with that one, James, show us the Duo Network Gateway.
So you're going to see this theme over and over again, how simple Duo is to kind of set up and get going. I'm going to start on this Duo Network Gateway and add a brand new application. So this is a web application, an interior power management app that I'm trying to publish for contractors. And the first thing I'm going to do is give it an external URL to be able to allow that contractor to access, and then give it a certificate. So the DNG can actually go out and grab a certificate from Let's Encrypt if we want, or I can provide my own. Next, I'm going to give it the internal URL. So this is where I'm proxying to. And then finally, I can set up a session duration. Now, this is key to Zero Trust because I want to check in every 10 minutes, for example, to check the status of that session. Now, once I hit add, that part's done. I can jump over to my Duo admin console and get into my contractor's power management application that I've created. And with this, just like the previous demo, you can kind of see the policy that we've stood up. Require the contractor to come in from the United States only, require 2FA. And more specifically for this use case, I'm restricting what OSs those contractors can use. So they must come in on a OS X box or a Windows box, and it must be up to date. And the cool thing with Duo is I can do all of this without an agent. So this is all clientless that we're doing this checking of OS, browser, or plugins. Now finally, Duo makes it easy to link it up to who should have access to this application, so we can do group access control. Now, if we've got Bob, our contractor, that wants to get access to this application, he's going to go through enrollment. Just like brand new, has never touched this app before, the first thing I'm going to do is give it my phone number and verify the ownership of that phone number. Now, Bob now verified this phone number, and Duo's going to tell Bob and ask when we want it to prompt. And now from here, I can easily do a MFA based on the phone and Bob as a user. So I'm going to enter in my code and hit login, and the next step is I have access to that access gateway, and it's very specifically published my 2 APCs or power management applications that I can access and allow that contractor Bob to do his job pretty easily.
Awesome stuff, man. Can you imagine now if you're trying to set up remote access VPN just to do that simple thing of just publishing one app? I mean, that's all we're doing here. And then we bring in that remote contractor, and they say, oh, you got to deploy this agent, you got to do all these things, and they might have another VPN agent. This thing is dead simple. Let's just get it out there. Let's put the URL out there, publish that app, and then we get all the greatness of Duo. SSO, multi-factor, device trust. I mean, really awesome user experience as well. I mean, can you think if we had this at Cisco? We had one of those nice portals. You go home, and you had all your apps right there. You click on them, you got SSO, and you're doing the multi-factor. That'd be pretty cool. I hope Cisco IT's listening, because I would love that. So, what about workload? Let's get into that next critical pillar here. Workload, it's all about establishing trust with tetration. Tetration, first thing we got to do is visibility and behavior modeling, because our customers really don't know how their applications work in their data center. So we're going to do that. We're going to automate that whole approach for them through application discovery and our dependency maps. And dependency maps allow us to see how these applications communicate with themselves as well as with the user community. Once we have a good picture, then, we're going to take that picture and enforce a trust-based access policy for them. We're going to do that with an automated, very context-rich policy, and it's got to be consistent. tetration works everywhere. It works in the cloud, it works on-prem, every workload that you can think of. Once we have that, we can't stop there. We have to make sure we do continuous trust verification. Is it still as trustworthy as I thought it was the first time? And we do that through our security visibility. We have a nice health score dashboard that we're going to dive even deeper into. And then vulnerabilities. What about vulnerability and the health of those workloads? I want you to tell me when I have a super vulnerable machine so that I can change its trustworthiness and maybe even take it offline if I have to, if it's compromised, for example. There's an elephant in the room, and I want to address it real quick, and that's the cost of tetration. It used to be really expensive. They've done a great job of lowering the entry point and allowing more of our customers to have these capabilities. I mean, take a look at this. For SaaS, it's only $35 per workload per month. You can start as low as 100 workloads, and then $40K. And then one license. So no more multi-licenses. You get one license for your workloads, and it covers everything. So all the cool stuff you're going to see, one license to get that done. All right, so what do we do first? Well, let's understand our whole environment. Understand what our workloads are doing. We do this automated discovery, and we do clustering. And what is clustering? It's a fancy word for grouping things. So I take all my DNS looking things, and I put them in the DNS group. Oh, these look like they're email servers, so I'm going to put them in an email cluster. And we do that throughout our workloads. And then we can do a policy generation. Because we know exactly how they're interacting, let's whitelist that. And that becomes my zero trust policy. We get this great app view, which really from a snapshot view shows us how everything is communicating. And for the first time, the customer is going to see how their apps interact and be able to pinpoint the really critical parts of an application that they probably had no idea were critical before. And in this case, we have one kind of in the upper top left where it says payment stats. Everything is talking to payment statistics. Probably a benign thing that they didn't realize was so critical to the operation of their payment app before. We take that visibility and we turn it into really cool dynamic policies. They got to be dynamic. So look at the first rule there. Client posture equals non-compliant. I deny you access. Well, how does it know it's non-compliant? That's the user. Well, it's because ICE is integrated, and ICE is telling it, hey, that user that's trying to talk to you, Mr. Workload, that's a non-compliant device. I don't think you should do that. Same with SGTs. It understands all the SGTs, things like quarantine. Like, yeah, I'm not going to talk to quarantine devices, thank you. And then along the way, all these objects are dynamic and can change as your environment changes. We even support Kubernetes now, so we can get into the container world, which I think is really cool. I mean, that's the future. So in this demo, we're going to show you the whole hybrid cloud segmentation. I mean, how does this thing really work? We're going to solve 3 customer problems along the way. One is discover, model, and baseline everything. Like, what's going on in my data center? I need to know how my workloads are, what they're doing. And then how can I create and enforce a zero trust segmentation policy that adapts, because my workloads move all over the place. They might go to the cloud, they might come back on-prem, containers are dissolving all the time, I need to be able to adapt. And then finally, I need to limit that workload access to only the users and devices that require it, and frankly, that deserve it, that they're trustworthy enough to talk to those apps. And we're going to log and audit everything along the way. So, Jamie, why don't you show us how this one works?
So I'm actually going to start from a client point of view, because the workloads are no good unless we can talk to them. And in this scenario, we've got an employee on a laptop, and that employee has access to a financial or invoicing application, and they also have access to a corporate blog. Now, the same machine, if a contractor logs in, will have access to both by default. So before tetration has come in and actually secured these workloads, just like a lot of our customers, I've got access to both the blog and the invoicing app as a contractor. So that's no good. Enter tetration. The first thing I'm going to do is this brand new 3.3 feature and integrate it with the campus. And so the workplace is able to leverage ICE and share information about group tags and use that for policy. So I can see my employees, which is SGT4, and my contractors, which are SGT5, are now learning all the mappings of all those devices from the workplace right directly in tetration. Now, once I have this data, I can start to do that application dependency mapping. So if you've never seen this before, we can map out, based on the time and date, what traffic we want to evaluate to create policy. Now, once ADM runs, it's going to be able to tell us, based on that work plane, what policies I should start to enforce and the clusters that it's actually found. So the first thing we see is actually this list of clusters, and it's telling us based on the communication what should be clustered together. Now, I'm smart enough to know to give it a better name that's more descriptive, and this is also going to help us visualize the policy in a meaningful way. So the first thing you're going to do is kind of give it some names so that when we go in and look at the policies themselves, they don't say IP addresses, they're saying those cluster names. Now, I can search that policy and review that policy, and in this example, I can see I'm allowing employees to talk to TCP port 80 of our front-end workload application, and I can see that I'm using the employee SGT to allow that front-end access. This is huge for us. It's differentiating being able to cross the workplace into this workload. So SGT4 is allowed to talk to my front-end workload. Now, next thing I'm going to do is just review this policy to make sure it's based on based on what I've seen. I can also run experiments. Once I'm confident, I can do the one-click policy enforcement. So I hit enforce. Every device that's running tetration can now enforce that nice policy that we've created. Now, lastly, if I jump back to my contractor's machine, because that wasn't a part of my initial policy, contractor can still get to the blog, but no longer get to that invoicing application that should be protected.
Awesome stuff. I mean, nobody else is doing it. What do you guys think? That's pretty cool stuff, right? That's so differentiating. I mean, I got to recap this one because it was awesome. So we started first. If you didn't notice, you can pick it up. But it was a totally flat network with zero segmentation in the beginning. And he showed how we have access to everything. The contractor was totally unrestricted. And it was a clean slate in tetration. And very quickly, we deployed some agents, and they discovered the whole thing for us. So they discovered how these things are working, what's actually there. They also discovered the vulnerabilities that are on those machines to give us a nice threat score of how secure and trustworthy everything is. And then we integrate it with ICE. And those SGTs come pouring in, user profiles. I mean, all the things ICE knows, tetration knows. And now we can create policies that are end-to-end, literally end-to-end. Nobody else can do that. And then finally, we did that automated one-click dynamic rule for enforcement and turn those shields up mentality. Really cool stuff. In this demo, we're going to extend the trust to the verification part and show you how tetration has grown into a full-blown security product. I mean, we've come a long way with tetration from doing micro-segmentation and just kind of focusing there to all sorts of security stuff that I'm really excited to show you here. We're going to show you 3 customer problems. We're going to solve those. What is the real-time health of my environment? And we're going to give you a nice score for our customers so that they can see that, and then dive into the details of how do I remediate anything. I need to defend those workloads from attacks. I mean, obviously, we've got to do that. And then how can I leverage my other security tools, in addition to tetration, to help protect those workloads? How do we integrate that into an architecture? So with that, Jamie, show us security.
So like most threat demos, I like to put myself in the shoes of the bad guy, and we're going to start as the bad guy looking at this Struts web application. And this Struts web application is obviously vulnerable, and I'm going to use a tool called Metasploit, open source, available to anyone to use. And from this workload .130, I can exploit this Struts web vulnerability right from this machine. Once I actually exploit, I get root access. So I can install software on this machine and also scan from the context of that workload. So now I'm scanning from that compromised host. All of this is really bad behavior from a workload point of view. We shouldn't really want to see this. Now, tetration does a great job bubbling this up, making the operator's life easy, and we can see this 0 forensic score, which is really bad. Goes 0 to 100, 100's an A, 0 is the low F. Now, if we jump into this forensic score, we can immediately see the workload that we just exploited. Now, this workload has a 0 score as well. I know the problem must exist for this specific workload. Now, to get a more detailed forensics view, tetration allows me to look at the different commands and processes and shows me immediately that this fired because of a struts exploit, and it's a high severity event, and immediate action is required. Now, along with this exploit detection, we can also go into the new vulnerability dashboard to see things like all the vulnerabilities that exist per host, as well as see what is low complexity, like the stuff I should fix immediately. And from a individual workload point of view, I can see exactly what packages are out of date and go tell my server admins to fix it. Now, lastly, because this was actually a bad threat, the next thing I want to do is actually create quarantine with tetration. And it makes it pretty easy to assign annotations that say things like quarantine or investigate. And so once I do that, I can now come into my tetration policy and create a default role that says I should never communicate with anything that has that tag of quarantine. Now, once I create a deny any rule and hit enforce, not only will that host start to block communication, but every other workload that has tetration on it will isolate that system immediately or effectively putting it in its corner so it can't communicate.
Neat stuff. So, and to recap that, and I had to put a picture of that really cool dashboard because I love it, and I think our customers are going to really like to see this. That dashboard, I mean, think about how quick and easy it is. You deploy a few agents out to your workloads, and this thing does it auto-magically. Like, it's going to come up with this score. It's going to figure out your vulnerabilities, all your packages and deployed. You'll have a full inventory of every file and every workstation. This is powerful stuff. It's machine learning. It's automation. It's integration, all working together. Our last and final critical area is workplace. So these are all the networks that I control. And this is about establishing trust with SD Access and ICE and DNA Center. First thing, just like in the workload space, I need to discover and classify everything. This is where my IoT devices live. We know that over 50% of the devices on a typical network, they're not users and devices. They're IoT devices. They're printers and IP cameras and phones. We needed to be able to deal with those. We're going to profile them, figure out what they are. Then BYOD. Tons of BYOD devices come on. I need a way to have a whole life cycle management for those devices so that I can determine how trustworthy they are at any given time. And then finally, posture. I want to get right down to the health of that device. Like, is its AV running and installed and up to date? Does it have all the patches that I need it to? You know, we know that our customers still can't patch well. I mean, think about this stat. It's 42% in 90 days. 42% is the number that says how much patching, how much of the 100% of patching they have to do, have they done in 90 days? I mean, that's crazy. So 42% patch in 90 days, that's not good enough. We need a zero trust to better inform us of what really is trustworthy and not. Next one, context-based enforcement. So I take all that discovery and I put it into nice rules, and we'll use our differentiator here, which is totally SGTs, our group-based policy abstract. Nobody else can touch this. That's a differentiator for us. And then, of course, we got to do this all the time. The continuous aspect of this trust has to happen. We'll do continuous posture assessment. If you go turn off that antivirus engine, boom, you're quarantined. Vulnerability assessments, you just loaded something that's totally vulnerable, out-of-date version, quarantined. And then indications of compromise. AMP just said that you just got compromised, quarantine. So we have this whole dynamic integrated method to do this. This wouldn't happen really without DNA Center. I mean, DNA Center makes the whole zero trust architecture practical in the workplace. It has the best automation that we can think of to deploy just the fabric itself. Let's get out the fabric with VXLANs, VLANs, routing. I mean, it's a couple clicks. It's a wizard opportunity here to get this thing deployed, which used to take man-months to do. Then we get into the really hard stuff, which is let's deploy the access control out to those switches and wireless controllers. .1x, profiling. We need to do all the switch device sensors. We're going to turn on those sensors. All that stuff has also been wizard-based. And the best thing that I like about it is they took our design guides, which are literally individually 300, 400 pages, and put all that intelligence into DNA Center. So when you say, yes, deploy .1x, it's doing it based on like a decade of experience doing that. In the zero trust journey with SDA, we need to break it down into simple areas, like macro segmentation first. Let's take a bunch of stuff and put them into big buckets, and we call those virtual networks, or VNs for short. So all my IoT devices, I'm going to put you in the IoT VN, and then you're in your nice protected bubble there, and segment it off. For all my guests, I'm going to put you in your own VN too, because I don't want you messing with my stuff. Then we very quickly get down to micro segmentation, and this is where security group tags comes in, or scalable group tags as we now call them. SGTs, employee. So that employee tag isn't made up of just an identity. I'm Jamie and I'm an employee in Active Directory. It means that I'm Jamie, I'm an employee in Active Directory, yes, but the device I'm on is compliant with the posture assessment that was done. That device is a corporate device and it's been enrolled. And on we go to the context that makes up that individual tag. So what happens when I need to go from big group to big group, from VN to VN? Well, that's where the next-gen firewall comes in. I'm really happy to report we now support SGTs for destination in the 6.5 release, just about to land. So we're going to do the full SGT policy at that firewall, and then down below at the .1x level, at the access level, I can do all my access control policies there too. As I go up to the perimeter, I have the next-gen firewall with its tag-based policies protecting me from threats, and then I pivot into the data center. And what's there? My workloads with tetration. So it's really important that I have tetration and ICE integrated. So when a user shows up to that workload, it knows all about that user. It knows all about their device and can make a good decision on whether it should allow it access or not, whether it should trust it. So in this demo, for SD access for wired and wireless, we're going to solve three problems. One is, what is and what has been on my network? I really got to discover everything. How do I establish trust for those users and things once I figure out what they are? And then I need to easily apply a group-based access policy to every user and every device everywhere I control. So Jamie, show us how this one works.
So I'm actually going to start as Tom, one of our Acme Corp employees, on a managed iPad. So this managed iPad has Meraki System Manager on it, which allows us to do detailed posture compliance on the mobile devices. Now, ICE can deal with this by applying quarantine. So as Jamie said, as soon as we see something that's non-compliant, we can control that with ICE. Now, if we take a look at the policy, Meraki gives us tons of capabilities there that we could spend an hour on today. This specific iPad, if we look at it, it's not matching that security policy because it doesn't have an up-to-date agent. We can actually push and deploy updates for both applications and software updates right from Meraki. Now, if we take a look at the overall policy I've created for this, you can control role-based access based on those mobile devices and the integration with Meraki. Now, once we're up to date, Tom is going to go through and check a customer out. They want to buy a really cool widget. It's $99.99. So Tom rings them up and immediately is able to take the cash. And as a result, that iPad's actually going to send traffic to the printer. Now, ICE can help a lot with these IoT devices, and specifically establishing trust for this printer that we just printed to from that iPad. We can see the policy that's matching whether or not it's a printer and that we're assigning a SDT of IoT. When we look at the individual object for that printer, we can see how ICE made the decision to establish trust. Immediately, we can see the attributes associated with profiling. It has a DHCP class identifier of Hewlett-Packard. It's got this host name and this software running on it. Now, along with doing that profiling, it can detect anomalies if that device starts to misbehave or act differently, but it's also going to keep track of all the authentication attempts that it goes through. And we also can use this integration with Rapid7 or another vulnerability management company to understand the risk of this IoT device. Now, once we've done this, we can do this per device type. So if you've got a printer or any type of IoT, we can set it up so it scans on an interval. If it hasn't been scanned in 48 hours, let's scan it again. And then also, even if it sits on the network for days, we can continually scan. Now, let's jump into what this looks like from Tom's iPad point of view in StealthWatch Enterprise. StealthWatch Enterprise is going to be able to pull information out of ICE to know that, hey, this is an iPad, Tom is the current authenticated user, but also here is all the application traffic from that iPad. And the reason why I might want to know that is if I see anomalies, I can then go back and quarantine or investigate directly from StealthWatch, integrating with ICE. And one of the key things here is ICE can do that enforcement with microsegmentation using group-based policy. Quarantine can't talk to IoT, employees can talk to IoT, and a few other additional use cases here. Now, to get that least privileged group-based policy, StealthWatch can also help me. Now, what I can do is actually search based on those scalable group tags, and I can export the data. Now, if you're like me, you'd probably write a Python script and take this data and be able to import it back into ICE, but there's got to be something a little bit easier than Excel. And so enter DNA Policy Analytics, a tool that's coming pretty soon here that will help us take information from ICE and from StealthWatch and start to report on all the flows that are happening between scalable groups as well as the StealthWatch host groups, and be able to see each and every integration or flow that's happening. Now, for Zero Trust, I can start to look at this based on endpoint profile, based on those scalable groups that I've created, or even look at the StealthWatch host groups, which, if you're not familiar, could contain everything from the SaaS application to whether or not it's a risky site or not. Now, the goal here is one day we should be able to click export or apply policy, and this thing will provision that Zero Trust policy everywhere across that workplace.
That's awesome, Jamie. I love that one. Totally love that one. Let's recap it real quick. So we're in the workspace, and we do SD access, and we're done that retail payment on the iPad, and once it goes to the printer to print out that receipt. So we started with ICE, and ICE was integrated with Meraki, so we had the MDM compliance coming in. Then ICE profiled everything. It showed that printer in just gory detail. I mean, it knew the operating system of the printer. It knew the vulnerability scan from a third party, and knew all the vulnerabilities of that printer. All that can be used for that zero trust policy. Like if it was too vulnerable, we could just set a policy that says, if you're too vulnerable, you can't be on my network. And that would have remediated that printer. And then we showed Stealth Watch. And that new DNA Center policy analytics tool, I mean, that's awesome stuff. For the first time, we're going to have a way that does what Tetration kind of does with its discovery for workloads. We're going to do that in the workplace. That's awesome. So in summary, let's bring up Shelley Blackburn to take us home. Thanks, Shelley. Thank you.
Jamie, can we give it up for them? Nice job, you guys. All right. Well, it's clear that we differentiate in this space, zero trust architecture. The way we do this is through, really, as Jamie pointed out, the breadth of our portfolio, but our integrated approach. We have Duo for the workforce, Tetration for the workload, and all its auto magic that it enables. We have SD access for workplace, and all the man months it saves. Jamie, I love that. And it is clear that we have a winning strategy here. So here's our call to action. First, we want you to learn this zero trust story. We're here to help you. Right now, Jamie and Jamie are helping all of our multi-domain architects in GSSO with this same demonstration and approach. So please work with us. We'll help you in any way. Start with Duo. It's easy. There's a free demonstration and trial. Take it out to your customer base. And finally, leverage our new SDA, POV kits, and D-Cloud, and show your customers how we differentiate in this space. Thank you all for attending, and good selling.